Hey guys, my name is Lexi, and this is a Sincerely Self podcast. Today, I am super excited. We have our first guest that this is the first Zoom podcast that I've done. Most of them have been in person, so that's pretty exciting. I'm here with Diamond Drip, and you are a spiritual growth coach. So just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into that field, and just some of the things that you've been accomplishing lately.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. I would
Mm-hmm.
say that I found spiritual growth coaching actually through business coaching, which is not exactly the normal route one would take, I'm guessing, but it was the route that I chose nonetheless. So I've been an entrepreneur for 4 years, and 2 years into being an entrepreneur, I participated in a clinical trial that actually healed my depression. And I say that that was really the catalyst for me being even open to spiritual things,
Yeah.
seeing life as something bigger than myself. The
Mm-hmm.
trial looked at psilocybin, which is the active component in magic mushrooms, and how it could help individuals with bipolar 2 treatment resistant depression. And
Mm-hmm.
that trial showed me that I was doing a lot of hustling and I didn't really feel like I was moving the needle. And that's not why I started either one of the businesses that I was running at that point.
Yeah.
So I took a look at what I liked from both and I consolidated. And so I shut down the product-based business. I moved into an online coaching space. I chose business coaching because it was measurable.
Mm-hmm.
What I really wanted to do was like purpose clarity, doing some life coaching. But I was like, I can't market myself as that because I don't know what the metrics are for that. I don't know how measurable that is.
Mm-hmm.
And because I fear pivoted into business coaching, I was then left with figuring out what set me apart from my competition. Because in business coaching, they're always talking about like niche clarity, niche for now. Who do you
Mm-hmm.
serve? Well, how do you set yourself apart from your competition? And I'm like, well, everyone talks about my energy, but I can't teach people how to have my energy. So I guess that's a flop. Because
Yeah, you're like, what to do?
right? So in this effort of trying to integrate what I had experienced in the clinical trial in my personal life and figuring
Mm-hmm.
out how to show up as my fullest self in that area, and then trying to figure out what my business superpower was and
Mm-hmm.
use that to magnetize my people who are in my niche. I was like, okay, how do I make this work? And at a time where I really needed it the most, somebody close to me, she asked me, she was like, do you know your energy type? She's like, people talk about your energy. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, actually.
You're like,
And
huh?
she's right. And she sends me this calculator, and it was the Jovian Archive calculator, which they don't give as many details as the calculator on my site because their whole business model is made so that you buy the report. They're like, we're just going to give you this one word about
Mm-hmm.
each thing. And then if you want to know more, buy this. I'm like, I'm not buying a report for something I don't know anything about.
Yeah, you're like, no thanks.
No. So I went to YouTube University as we typically tend to do.
Yeah. Yes.
And I got the scoop. And that honestly started my rabbit hole that is now human design because I looked up what does it mean to be a generator? What does it mean to have emotional authority? What does it mean to be a 5/1? And everything that I found, it was me. It was
Mm-hmm.
like it was like, you know, I think one of the metaphors that I used was like I was walking around with foggy glasses, and for
Mm-hmm.
the first time, someone came through with like the cleanest, the best cleansing lens ever. And they were like, this is actually how you see the world. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
You're like, this is completely different than I thought. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And even though I didn't know how it was going to tie into business and brand coaching,
Mm-hmm.
I whereas before, I was like, I'm going to do business coaching because that's what's measurable. And I'm scared to do the thing that I really want to do. With this, it was like, okay, I really want to do this. I don't really know if there's a market for it. And that scares me because I know people want to know how to start a business. I don't know how
Mhm.
much people are looking for what I'm doing with this, but I was like, I am going to do it in spite of the fear. And
Mhm.
so that kind of launched me into this new direction, which is spiritual growth coaching. And so I still work with, business clients, but I always say you need to know yourself before you start working on any sort of brand or social media strategy, because if you don't, you're just going to be following all the latest trends, and that's not sustainable.
I think your story is so cool because I think honestly the main thing I focus with on the Sincerely Self is being authentic to yourself and just what that can bring you. And so your story of like finally figuring out like and tapping into your energy. Everyone's like, "Oh, you have a magnetic energy like this and this," but no one ever dives into what that actually means. So the fact that you were able to do that, like I'm sure it was completely mind-blowing the things that you can learn about yourself. One of the things that you had been talking to me about when we were planning the podcast was human design and just kind of what that means for you and how you were able to use it. So, give me just like a rundown of what human design is and how we can use it to our benefit.
Yeah. So human design, I like to say, especially these days, is like we all have heard that we're a mind, a body, and a spirit. And so
Mhm.
I use spirit as synonymous as like soul. So
Mhm.
I'm saying the same thing when I say that. And so we know that our minds are busy all the time. That inner critic can be really loud sometimes. And there's a lot of times where there's this misalignment that happens. Our mind is saying one thing, which is causing us to like stress, and that's showing up in the body. And then we just feel like we're not aligned spiritually. We feel like we're not moving towards our purpose. We don't know what our
Mhm.
purpose is because we're just like sleepwalking through life in this way. And so human design gives you a way to see the gifts and the strengths that your soul chose to be successful in this lifetime. It also gives you insight into areas where, because you didn't have consistent access to whatever those gifts, whatever that energy was, you look to people outside of yourself to kind of get that validation. So whether that was your family, your friends, or the biggest one, society, always telling us messages in the media subliminally in our face.
Mhm.
And so it helps you to cancel out all of that outside noise that may be impacting your decision making, that might be causing that misalignment. And it helps you to trust that inner voice inside of us. We all have wisdom deep in our bones, but we choose, especially with things like our intuition,
Mhm.
because it can't be backed up by facts. It's like, well, I don't have a reason to feel this way. So I guess I'm going to do it because the facts say, versus listening to when we have that feeling and saying, no, actually, this doesn't feel right. And I don't need to have any other reason other than this doesn't feel right.
Yeah. I think you're so right with that. Everybody just goes off of the world around them instead of what's going on inside of them. And I've told a couple people before, like our body is literally a compass. Seriously. Like if we'll listen to our intuition and just listen to our feelings, even if we don't have facts to back it up, if we just listen, like we will be guided exactly to what's going to serve us, exactly to where we're supposed to go. And I personally haven't really looked into that exact topic before, but I guess I've looked at things like similar to it, like how our like purpose spiritually, how that can affect us. Like I've looked into that a little bit, but how have you used that specifically to kind of decide where you were going to go?
Yeah. So I am a big believer in transparency. And so I say that I have emotional authority. And It is a user's manual, but you still have to like read it and understand the rules. So with emotional authority, I'm a generator, so I have sacral definition. So as generators, which you give me generator vibes. I don't know if like Gen is like, you'll have to let me know whenever you do pull your chart. But
No, literally, I have to pull my chart after this and tell you
yeah.
because I'm excited now. I'm like, I need to know.
So as a generator, which I'm fairly confident in saying that just simply because 70% of the population is either a manifesting generator or generator. And so we're like little energizer bunnies. We can just go and go and go as
Mhm,
long as we're doing work that we love. And
mhm,
so we have sacral definition. So our bodies will tell us, uh-huh, like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to do that. Or,
mhm.
no, I actually don't want to do
It's
that.
not for me. I'm good.
Right? It's not for me. And and so for pure generators, it stops there. So it's like, like in the moment awareness. When you
Mhm,
have emotional authority as a generator, you're supposed to ride out your emotional wave. So
mhm,
at a minimum, we're supposed to sleep on decisions to make sure that they're aligned. And if we can give ourselves more time for truth and clarity to come through, like that's even better. And
mhm.
this is something that I just had a situation just this weekend that came up and I was like, but I said like trying to go against one of my undefined centers. So I don't have the ego heart center defined in my chart. And so this is like half the population doesn't have this definition. And
Mhm,
so we live in a culture, which is not bad all the time. I'll say that all the time. But we live
mhm.
in a culture where it's like if you make a commitment, like you got to follow through. Like you have to do it. Like no matter if you change your mind, like you said you were going to do it, you have to do it. So
Mhm,
on Thursday, I agreed to speak at an event that was happening in Laurel, Maryland. And I
mhm,
live in Maryland. And so I was driving and I was moving fast and I told the person like, yeah, everything seems great. I'm gonna solidify my speaker slot tonight. I'm gonna pay the fee so I can get, the table, the footage, all the things.
mhm.
And the day went on and I started to not necessarily feel like something just wasn't feeling right, but I didn't have a logical reason. And I found out the next day that there was a conference on the same day that was actually more of my audience. So the first one was like leadership, kind of corporate space, mental health. And the second conference that I was becoming a finalist in, and I wouldn't have to pay a fee. These are
Oh.
spiritual entrepreneurs. These are
Mhm,
people who believe in the whole entrepreneur. Not only that, it's an event geared specifically towards women. And it started later. So I would have time to, because the other one was from 9 to 3, and this one was from 12 to 5. So I would
mhm.
have time to cook breakfast, spend time with my daughter before I leave for the event. Like it just
Mhm.
overall was a better situation.
Yeah.
And I, not knowing this, I solidified my slot on Thursday. And I immediately had to call on
Mhm.
Friday morning and I had to say, like, I double booked myself on accident. Like, is there any way we can work around this? And she basically was giving me a hard time. It was like,
Mhm.
it's non-refundable. And I was like, it didn't say that it was non-refundable. And I'm also calling you within 24 hours. So,
Yeah.
long story short, we're in this situation now where I had to have my lawyer draft up this letter and basically be like, we want a refund because it never said that it was non-refundable. And
Mhm.
we let you know within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And this person, I don't know her design, but I something tells me there's some emotionalness going on in there
Yeah.
because I went the business route and I was like, hey, like all of these things. And she's like, you don't want to support me. Don't ever feel like you need to come to my events in the future because that's not what real support is. And I'm like, I did want to support you, I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't know I was double booked for this thing. Like I didn't find out until today.
Yeah,
And
quite an emotionally driven response from her, seems
yes,
like.
yes. And so this is another instance in my human design experiment where if I would have just listened to that feeling inside me that said, just wait a minute. Like, I know you said you were going to solidify the spot
Hmm.
tonight, but like, just wait a minute. Because if I would have waited a minute, I would have seen that I was actually accepted into this other conference, which was a much better fit. And
Yeah.
so it's being able to trust your feeling, being able to trust your intuition, being able to not listen to outside noise like that says
Hmm.
like, oh, you should. I call it the shoulds and the have tos. It's like, well, I said that I would, so now I have to. Like, no,
Yeah.
actually.
And worrying about what they are going to think or how they are going to feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it shows up in different areas of my life. I'm getting clearer indications of, because it's one thing to know, like your body has wisdom, listen to yourself. It's another thing for your brain, which has been conditioned. I just turned 29 in July. It's another thing
Mhm.
for your brain, which has been conditioned for 28 years to believe another thing that, like, oh, you can just listen to yourself. Like, you don't need anybody to validate that. Psh, yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Like, it's another thing for you to accept it.
Yeah. And like to constantly have society reevaluating that, like, oh, you can only trust what you're feeling. Like, no, you have to have facts to back it up. And so
Yeah,
when you're trying to change your like way of thinking, but society is constantly pushing against it, it makes it even harder.
yeah, yeah. So, aligned decision making, it's in
Hmm.
the works, but it's not always, a seamless process.
Hmm. Yeah. But I love that example that you use. Seriously, like that is literally insane that you had the feeling and then right after the opportunity presented itself and you're like, well, next time I guess I'll listen.
Yeah.
Uh, Everybody has like it's not seamless. You don't listen and then you see why you should have in the future. I have so many moments like that too, where I've just been like, well, if I would have waited, then I would have been able to have a better opportunity.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
The next thing, and this is the one that I'm really like interested in, and you're gonna have to really educate me on because I haven't read a whole lot about it, is gene keys.
Okay.
It's how we can use it to learn about ourselves, to overcome trauma, and to apply the lessons into our life. So first, what is gene keys? Like, what does that entail?
Yeah. So, for a moment, human design is a synthesis of a bunch of different sciences. So, astrology, astronomy, the Chinese I Ching, the Kabbalah tree of life, Hindu, Brahmin, chakra model, um, to name a few. And so, human design, it synthesizes all of those into like this one body graph chart.
Hmm.
Gene keys is almost like a laser focus on some of the things that we look at in human design.
Okay.
So in human design and in gene keys, there are 64 gates or 64 keys. And every single one of those has like a theme. So like 53, gate of beginnings. But in gene keys, it combines the Chinese I Ching. So whatever that archetype is for that key, and
Hmm.
then it pulls in the quantum physics because we all know that different energies, like we vibrate at different frequencies. So there are lower frequencies,
Hmm.
there are, higher ones, and then there's like really high ones, like if we're looking at the colorful chart. And
Hmm.
so in Gene Keys, the shadow, these are lower frequencies that many of us have lived like 90% of our lives in because
Wow.
of our conditioning. We're listening to mom, dad, friends, like we're listening to society and what it's telling us we should act like and what things should look like.
Hmm.
And so when you're able to transform the shadow into the gift, you're able to start seeing synchronicities. You're able to start stepping into what we in human design call your signature theme, which for generators is satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're really aligned, when you're really moving towards your purpose here in this lifetime, when you're really doing the work that you were put here to do, you experience what's called the siddhi, which is a Sanskrit word, Siddhi. And this is like the highest of frequencies that you can be on. And I'll give context because human design is very practical. It's very step by step. It's like, okay, you are a generator. You live your life in response. So yes, you may have an idea, inspiration, something that might come as a download. Don't
Mm-hmm.
go out and initiate it. Wait for someone else to be like, oh, hey, did you know I was thinking about doing this thing? Or seeing a commercial or seeing something that like gives you something to respond to so you can check in with your sacral and like make sure that's the right direction for you. And
Yeah, like
so
so.
in a way, it's kind of like this, give and take.
Mm-hmm.
So with Gene Keys, it's a lot of contemplation, which is where the shadow work comes in,
Mm-hmm.
because you're looking at your past experiences, you're looking at the way that you grew up, maybe, and you're seeing areas where you have lived in these different lower frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just talking about the 53 being the gate of beginnings. And so that's like my most important gift. That's what I'm here to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to be a launch pad to launch people into these new cycles. And so the Gene Keys side of that is transforming the shadow of immaturity. So being in this place of constantly seeking external validation and
Mm-hmm.
moving to a place where I'm internally grounded, where I can validate myself and tell myself, like, no, you got this. You don't need anyone else to give you an A+ on whatever this is.
Yeah.
And so when I'm able to transform that shadow of immaturity, it becomes the gift of expansion. And it makes sense
Mm-hmm.
because if you're not waiting for other people to validate that what you're doing is okay, you expand quicker, you move into, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at its highest frequency is superabundance.
Mm-hmm.
And this was really troublesome for me as a practical solutions person who learned about human design first,
Mm-hmm.
because I saw a lot of areas in my life where I was seeking external validation. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this makes sense. Like, I need to change this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
too worried about what other people are saying about me and not enough about what I am saying about me.
Yeah.
So this tracks. I need to fix this. And then I was like, okay, yeah, if I fix this and I can expand. And then I was like, super abundance. I don't feel abundant with like super
Like,
abundant.
where is this at?
Right. And so a lot of the language in Gene Keys, which is why having a guide to hold you accountable can be super important, because it easily would have been something that I just let go. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, I don't see the step by step of how I get from here to here. So I'm just gonna focus on this other thing more. But
Mm-hmm.
actually having somebody who like week in and out was showing me areas where my mind was telling me these old stories that just weren't serving me. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like I need to rewrite them and learn how to validate from within.
Yeah.
And it was then that I started to open up to the possibility that superabundance can even be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't, we think of abundance as like on this material 3D like plane, where it's like, you have a bunch of stuff, you have a bunch of money. And it's like, no, there's time abundance, there's
Yeah.
relationship abundance, there's health abundance. Like there's so many different areas where we can be abundant in our lives. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's really what Gene Keys is. It's like actually sitting with each of the things that show up in your chart
Mm-hmm.
and being honest enough with yourself to say, yeah, I've lived in that shadow. How can I transform it into the gift? And like looking at different areas where you have that opportunity in the past and
Mm-hmm.
moving forward.
I love that. So it's kind of just exploring the good and the bad parts of you and just being able to be like, okay, this is all what makes me who I am, but what can I do to move forward and become my highest self or move to a higher vibration, like that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yes.
I love that. Yeah, everybody does. Anytime we're talking about abundance, everybody thinks, okay, well, I don't have $1 million in my bank account. I don't have that super nice house. Like, I don't have the brand new car. So, no, I'm not abundant. But there's so many areas in our life where abundance falls. And if we're not looking for it and we're conditioned with society, we think I'm not abundant.
Yes.
So I love that you were able to kind of overcome that and recognize, okay, these are the areas that I am abundant right now and I can grow in those. That's amazing. I need to do all of these things and like, I'm gonna let you know what I get from it because I'm like, I definitely need a little reality check just to see how I can move forward. I love that. So the next thing that I really want to talk about is your psilocybin clinical trial that you did and just kind of what you did during the trial. I know at the beginning of the episode, you were saying that it healed your depression, which a lot of people are conditioned to believe that they're stuck with it for their whole life and it never gets better. So I would love for you to just kind of tell us about your experience with it and also your experience with the recovery from your depression and just how you were able to move on with that.
Yeah. I may need a reminder of the recovery part, but I can definitely speak to the trial part.
Yeah, let's talk about the
uh,
trial first, then we'll talk about the recovery.
so the trial was a 15-week trial here in Maryland.
Mhm,
And majority of the trial was getting a baseline for how bad my depression and my bipolar 2 symptoms actually were.
mhm,
So I want to say that was like 8 weeks, something like that.
mhm,
It might have been 6. It might have been longer just because they want you on nothing mind altering. And so I had a medical marijuana card and I had to
mhm.
wait for all of that to run through my
Clear out of
system.
your system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
If
takes
I
a
was
little
on
bit.
Yeah, if I was on antidepressants, like it would have been the same thing.
Mm,
So for me, it was natural medicine that had to run its course. So the first part of the trial is really just them, you talking with the therapist, you setting your intentions for the trial, them getting a baseline of how severe, I don't want to say bad, how severe your
mhm,
symptoms are. And then the actual dosing day process is 3 days. So you go in the day before, you take your last drug test to make sure like you're clean. And
mhm.
then they give you an opportunity to actually be in the room, try on the headphones, just so that the environment isn't completely new to you, so
Yeah.
that there's some form of familiarity. And then in the trial that I participated in, they did a co-pilot program. So I had been getting to know a therapist in the weeks leading up to the dosing day. But in case
Mhm,
she had to use the bathroom, she had a phone call, she had to go handle something, they have
mhm.
somebody else who's in the room that you meet the day before. So it's not like a complete stranger is in the room with you.
Yeah, you're like, oh, hello. How are you?
Right?
You're about to like go through this process with me.
Right? Or worse, they don't tell you, and then like they ask another doctor to step in, and you're like tripping midway, and you're like, you're not who I went to sleep with. Like
Yeah, you're like,
that.
hello, who are you?
Yes. So they introduce you to the co-pilot who's going to be in the room. And then they send you home. They tell you to get a good night's sleep. I got there at like 7:30 in the morning is when I had to be there. They gave me the dose, which they were able to scientifically extract the psilocybin from the mushroom itself and put it into these little capsules.
Mhm.
Um, that were very small. I really would love to see how they do that. But
Yeah. I'm like straight for the mushroom. That's crazy.
yes. Um,
Wow.
Especially because I make my own microdose capsules post trial,
Mhm.
and the double zeros hold like 0.3 grams. So I'm like, how did you get so much psilocybin into such a tiny capsule? How did you do it? But
You're like, you guys want to teach me?
right,
Like,
we
how
gotta
to
do
go?
something.
Yeah.
So the second day was the dosing day. I took it around 8 in the morning, and it was the full hero dose, or what I like to call the experience dose. I like to think of it as two things. And I do talk about this on a playlist that's on my YouTube channel. So the microdose is like, less than zero point 0.5. Hero dose, or what like I said, call the experience dose, is you're gonna have an experience. Like microdosing, you might be able to just go on with your life and like, think nothing of it. You might have a little bit of euphoria, but if you take an experience dose, your reality is going to be altered in some way.
Mhm.
You're going to experience something. So
Yeah.
just like be prepared.
Buckle up, prepare.
Right? Um, so that's what they did. And then, of course, as soon as I came out of, because when you take magic mushrooms, the typical wave that you ride is anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. They
Mhm.
had me stay at the facility for a full 8 hours just to make sure that, it was out of my system. And then, of
Mhm.
course, as a double safety precaution, I wasn't allowed to drive home. Somebody had to come pick me up.
Mhm.
So after I came out of the experience, where I was, seeing music and doing all the things in Mushroom Land, uh, they had me take another scale, and then they encouraged me to journal about what it was that happened. And then the
Mhm.
next day, I had to go in person and unpack everything that I journaled about, because from that moment on, for the remainder of the trial, it was just, integration. So talking with the
Mhm.
therapist about the things that had come up, and it was it was really cool to be able to have so many profound insights from that experience that I was able to take with me, and to see areas where I could do better. Because, like, in the mushroom trip, I like to say there's this separation of self. So, like, there's the you that you know that you've been knowing, but then you go into mushroom land, and then there's like that higher self, higher conscious version of you. And that
Mhm.
person, they're not caught up in comparison or judgment or shame or any of the things that we are on this 3D plane. And so the goal, when you start to integrate these things, is to try and learn, like for me at least, how I can be more of that person. Because that
Mhm.
person was awesome, and I want to be like her because she had no issues.
Mhm.
The moment when I understood that the trial had really worked for me was uh it was like a couple weeks after the experience was over. Um and I was driving to pick up my daughter from school, and I had worked out, I had had a great shower. I think around that time I had just cut my hair, so I was really loving the fact that I could just wash my hair and just go and just have these like cute little curls,
Yeah.
and everything was just clicking on all cylinders. And I had this thought that it would really suck to die that day.
Mhm.
And that was huge for me because it was through the pre-dosing day questionnaires that I learned that I was having a lot of passive suicidal thoughts,
Mhm.
where I would think, if I got hit by a car today, or if I lost control of the wheel or whatever, like it wouldn't be so bad. My family would get the insurance money. Like everyone would be better off if I wasn't alive. And
Mhm.
so I learned that those were passive suicidal thoughts, and I've been having them for a really long time. And to finally have that be lifted and to actually see hope for the future and to have goals and to know that, you know, there's this bigger purpose that I'm here for. Even if
Mhm.
at that time I didn't know what it was. But just
You just
to
knew
feel
you had
that.
a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
that was when I knew that it had worked.
That's amazing. I know exactly what you mean when you said that because I also suffer with depression. I have been going to therapy, which has helped me a lot with it. And I have used like medical marijuana to help with it a lot. So I haven't done like the trial sounds amazing, like amazing. But I've done like the journaling and everything. And in therapy, we would have to fill out a form every single time that I went, just like updating how I was feeling. And I was also having like the passive suicidal thoughts where it wasn't like I was actively like, oh, I wish I wasn't here. But I was like, if it happened, I wouldn't really care. Like I didn't have like too much of a will either way. I was just like, if it happened, whatever, you know? And
Yeah.
I had a day where I was like, I would not want that to happen. Like if I got in a car accident, I would not want to die. Like, and it is the craziest like feeling being like, I actually care. Like, wait, what? I actually care again. So the
Yeah.
fact that you had the trial that was able to help you get over that is amazing. So the next thing I kind of want to touch on a little bit is your bipolar, because I have borderline personality disorder, and those are different, but they have some similarities. And so with the trial, how has that helped with your bipolar?
Yeah. I would say the trial helped because it I would say the trial helped because it gave me this new outlook on life in a way. And so it caused me to see things from a different perspective, from a more understanding perspective,
Mhm.
um, and just having more compassion for myself and for others. And I I want to say microdosing helps me, like post trial. Microdosing helps me the most with this, especially because, having a uterus and the hormones that come with
Mhm.
having a
The
uterus,
joys that come with it.
right? Um, we have these four distinct phases of our cycle. And so one of them we're very familiar with is the luteal phase, also known as PMS. And it's during that time where we are more irritable and we're more sensitive, we're more critical of ourselves and others. And I find that psilocybin helps those the most because it gives me more empathy and patience and understanding. I'm like, okay, especially now that I know human design, I
Mhm.
my daughter, she would really push my buttons sometimes. She's 7 now, but obviously 2 years ago she was younger and more annoying. So
Yep.
so so to microdose and to understand how her energy flows, to understand areas where she's a little bit more stubborn and a little bit more willful, and to just give myself grace and say, okay, like she's not doing this to purposely upset you. She
Mhm.
is just being how she was designed. And
Yeah.
I'll say that the combination of understanding, my daughter, my partner on these deeper levels, and then having the added cushion, if you will, of psilocybin, which creates that deeper understanding and empathy and helps to rewire the brain in a way where you are tapped into that higher self, that fullest version of you.
Yeah.
uh, I would say the combination, it helps so much with the symptoms. Irritability was the one thing that it annoyed me how irritable I would get with other people and myself. Like I was like, I'm
No, I
irritated that
know what
I'm
you mean.
irritated.
Yeah, like with the BPD, my emotions are always like all over the place, and I'm like, this is tiring for me. Like, you guys are sick of it, I'm sick of it. Like, so I know what you mean with that.
Yeah, and then with the depression, really starting to understand sayings like we're just a perspective shift away
Mhm,
from choosing like better for ourselves. So when any bad thing happens or anything that's not, on the beaten path happens, we have a choice. It's usually a matter of like 7 seconds where we can be like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world. It's gonna, like, my day is ruined. And then
mhm,
having, especially with the way that we know the law of attraction works,
mhm.
putting that out into the universe and attracting more of that.
Yeah.
Or you can choose to say, I know this looks bad at first glance, but how can I choose to see this in a different way? How could this be a blessing instead? And choosing to go at it from that angle. And I would say the psilocybin has helped with making the choice to have it be a better outcome versus choosing the depression, which is like, well, I don't even know why I tried today anyway. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, being able to choose the perspective shift. Because
Yeah.
I love how you use the word choose because it's a constant choice. No matter how much you like try and train yourself to be able to just react that way, like you're never going to initially react that way. It's the choice to know, okay, if I shift my perspective, I know I'm going to feel better. I know it's going to benefit me. The law of attraction is going to help me. So I love that that's kind of what you're able to figure out with that. The last thing that I kind of want to talk about is you just released a book. So tell us a little bit about your book, what it's about, and just kind of what you've learned from releasing that.
Yeah. So the book is an anthology. It's called Destiny Exposé, The Leading Ladies, Volume 1. Um, Gosh, that was a process. Even the title switched
I'm
like
like,
towards
that
the
title's
end.
amazing. Like, that's an amazing title.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Amazon made us pivot. That wasn't the original title, but we're not going to talk about it on this
You're
episode.
like,
um, but it's a compilation of stories of women who are leading ladies in their own right. So they have redefined success for themselves and they are living in that success, in that success. And the stories talk about how we have overcome adversity, how we have overcome, challenges that have been thrown at us. And so
Mhm,
my chapter specifically is called Learning to Lead from Within.
mhm,
And it talks all about how I made the choice to step into my authentic leadership with
mhm,
these tools. It talks about how when I made the pivot from product-based business to service-based business, all of the stuff my brain threw at me, to include imposter syndrome and, new shiny object syndrome, just all the things that try and stop you
mhm,
when you make that big change. And it's interesting because going into writing my chapter, I was suffering with the very thing that I was writing about, because
mhm.
I am arguably the youngest author in that collection of women.
Yeah.
And they had like this whole life of experience. Like one of them, she was a 30-year retired brigadier general. This other woman had 23 miscarriages and had to give
Wow.
birth to a stillborn. And she talks about, coming back from those depths. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I went through depression and like I was like, but I
I
don't know
I
that
have this
my
life experience.
right. I was like, I don't know if my life story is quite, where theirs is. And so I talk about that because at the end of the day, The only thing that would have stopped me from participating in that anthology would have been myself, because I would have said, oh, my story isn't good enough to be in this book. Like, let me just back out now before I embarrass myself.
Yeah.
And that would have been a self-imposed limitation. Now it has become like such an awesome marketing piece. Like, we were on Fox and ABC, CEO Weekly, and
Oh,
Medium. So like all of these things came from this one project of me choosing to say yes to something that, right? If I listen to my logical brain,
you would have
like
been like, oh, I don't know. I love that. Well, I definitely need to read this book. I think that's amazing. And I love powerful women just uplifting other powerful women. And especially a book just all about like every woman's different stories and just kind of what they were able to overcome. Like, I think that is a beautiful thing. So I'm going to end the episode right there. I loved having you on the podcast. It was amazing. Thank you so, so much. I am going to link all of Diamond Drip's, like your new book that just came out, all of her links, her YouTube, so that you can go and check out all of her stuff and see what she's got going on.
just a reminder that the limit does not exist, but fear
Mhm.
and self-doubt will make you believe that it does. Stop holding yourself back. Your fullest, most abundant self is waiting for you.
We always are our biggest critic. We always hold ourselves to the highest standards. And so I think, especially from your story, it's such a big reminder to just listen to yourself and not let all of the conditioning that you've learned from growing up define you. This episode will be available on all services, Spotify, Apple Music, all of the things, and it'll also be on YouTube. So I will see you guys next week.